Introduction. Welcome on a journey beyond the veil of separation and captivity to freedom and bliss. Through a personal narrative presented as memoir in verse, I share a rainbow of experience, from shadows that haunted my earlier life, the multifaceted veil that separated me from my higher self, and the light of eternity that greets me each new day I rise. I've learned much on my spiritual journey and want to share it all with you, dear reader. This I will do through a variety of poetic expressions. But before you dive with me deep into my earlier darkness, know this. Beyond the veil that separated me from the one source of all love, light, and truth were the real answers for which I searched my entire life. Such deep questions haunted my mind and heart as I aged. Once I found silence, I learned how to listen. Only then did I hear the answers. For most of my life, I've lived with deep regret about my past. This regret lived in my self-talk. I wandered in circles through darkness, repeating what didn't work over and over. I never got very far in my search for the truth of my existence. There was no way I could see hope through my human blinders, nor could I find it. I spiraled into darkness. It really didn't matter whether I was a human being having a spiritual experience or a spiritual being having a human experience. I experienced intense emptiness. Only later did I recognize this void as of my own making, and I could choose a different outcome. In some sort of preparation that began organically through silent meditation and being in nature, I began to realize two realities coexisted during my time so far on earth. When I stood before the veil, I was sleeping. When I stood beyond the veil, I was awakening. If awakening was seeing the light, being the light, finding God within and all around me, then sleeping was being in the dark, being separated from the one source. That fearful place had always been home. Living in separation from my true nature was deeply painful. It led to my feeble attempts to take the ever-present pain away. Drinking, drugs, shopping, traveling, sexual encounters. The list was endless. But no matter where I went, I returned to find myself separate. As I began to recognize this sleeping state, I entered the dark night of the soul. Slowly, I became aware of feeling alone, confused, hurt, angry, remorseful, bitter, guilty, shamed, fearful, sad, hopeless, vulnerable, and wounded. Most of the time, I floated in space as if suspended against my wishes, in limbo, helpless. During this early stage of awakening, I began to see the veil, but could only brush against it. Fear always withdrew my hands. There were days, weeks, months, and years when it seemed free will was no longer my birthright. But if I am honest with myself, I knew, somehow and some way, that it was me who got to choose where I decided to stand. To make and keep that choice, however, required a myriad of divine interventions. Add to this my worry about the future. For the most part, I tended to ignore the present. But I learned if I chose to become aware in the present, synchronistic miracles began to happen. Over time, I learned that my reality depended on which choice I made. It always came back to my free will. The boundary between the two realities I call the veil of transmutation. This veil separated me, held me captive from freedom, before from beyond, disunited from united, dreamful instead of awakeful. I had to get through it. The truth is, the veil of transmutation separated me from remembering myself. At some point in advancing human evolution, I had to pass through this veil to the other side, stand beyond the veil. My memoir in verse is that journey. When I chose to awaken to the truth of who I was and why I was alive, I found a sense of belonging, clarity, well-being, joy, forgiveness, love, faith, trust, compassion, healing, meaning, as if I lived each moment driven to find my purpose through coming in contact with an immensely hot, golden bright white light. Most of my life, I didn't have much faith in anything, but during my awakening, I found it. My faith was the act of reaching out to touch the veil and lift it from my sight. Calm courage was required. There was no need for fear. Once the veil was removed, the status quo was ripped away from darkness and transfigured into my sustenance, equipping me for a life rich with love and purpose, a life of being in the one light from which I came and to which I shall return. In all, I learned my purpose on earth was to journey through to remembering who I was and why I came here at this time. To that end, my poems and stories can only be described as divine downloads, channeled through opening myself to voices of wisdom from the past, present, and future. And I wanted to share them with you, dear reader. Deep in the desert of New Mexico, I sat early each morning in contemplation, with a view of the Rio Grande Valley and Sandia Mountains before me. Nature gave me the beauty I needed to feed my soul and to become reachable by celestial messengers who I learned always had my best interests at heart. There is no other explanation for this book. Accompany me on my journey to the light, beyond the veil. May my words uplift and enfold you. May my poetry take you on an intimate journey where you too can find joy in being alive on earth. In this moment, glimpse into a celestial time of chaos and courage in human soul transmutation.